Mike's here, so it reminds me of it. But outages, you can't really know. You can't plan for the fact that you're going to come to work that day and everything you had planned to do just goes out the window because this thing happens. But what you can plan is how you're going to respond to that, and give it some thought to it and some planning ahead of time. Because, you know, at the time of the crisis, if you hadn't thought it through, it's harder to get that together. And so I think that quote is pretty good. Is this our, okay, this is just showing a bit of the informed screen. Again, this was written in-house, and it's building on the foundation that the other systems had in place. We would create, you can see we could create a notification. And here are some different types of outages: unplanned, planned, on-call response, maintenance, or scheduled. And of course, we just had to come up with our own definitions of this. We consider it planned if whoever is responsible for this, like in MIS, is giving more than 24 hours notice. And what we do with this is to kind of communicate internally, because in the past what could happen is somebody in this service area is planning an outage, and by the time somebody else finds out about it, they say, well, if I'd known you were going to do that, then I would have put this update in at the same time, and then we wouldn't have had to have 2 outages for the clients. So that's kind of what we do our planned outages for, is it's advance notice that this is something we're doing. It gives you an opportunity to piggyback on it if you want to. So
actually require 24 hours notice for planned outage, so that somebody can't just come up with something last minute and, you know, I was going to be coaching softball this afternoon, that was canceled, so I think I'll just do this. Because if that happens, there's not enough time for in MIS, our short setting managers to be able to see that and approve that, or realize this is, wow, you don't know it because you had nothing to do with this, but we have, you know, the upgrade of the units or whatever it is going on this afternoon. This was not, we'll talk about it, and that kind of thing.
Okay, and then there's the categories, which we're going to go through an example as soon as you'll see that. But you can see you can choose network segment, application, server, building, campus. And you'll see when you choose that, it's like a drill down, you have more options. But it's just going to make it so much easier. Like Pam said, we both remember the day when if something happened, you basically went to your most knowledgeable person of that area and said, what's going to be affected? And then they're in a crisis, and usually that is the person trying to work on resolving the problem, and they're trying to tell you what's going to be affected or who's going to be affected. And generally speaking, we don't remember everything all that well. And so this helps a lot with that. And so I'm going to show you a little scenario here. In this case, this is a planned outage. A planned outage is where you have some control over it. In this example, you're going to maybe apply an application update, and perhaps it's going to have database changes, so you want the clients out of the system, and you want to let them know in advance, because of course we try to schedule these things with the least impact as possible, either before or after working hours, unless it's very critical and they say they want us to just go ahead and do it. But it's best that they know, because a lot of times clients, we talked about that in the session with Mecklenburg County, clients are nice people, and they usually are very understanding as long as you work with them and give them some notice. Like if they know that you're going to be doing something and they can work on something else during that time or go to lunch during that time, they're usually okay with that. It's just they don't like unpleasant surprises. Don't bring it down in the middle.
I'm just going to say that for Pitt County, there's not really an off hours. There might be in case of the application that we're going to be talking about here, but we do have sheriff and detention and E911, and so there really is not a complete off hours, you know, for some things ever.
And talk about 911, I mean, that's where the planned outages is good, because we don't plan an outage without having talked to them first. Is this okay? When's the best time for you? Because obviously the more critical it is. So let me just go to this. this is just going to play through there. You can see what we're doing here is
And
we're
we really
creating,
can't see it well.
we're creating an outage, and then we're choosing a type, right there, planned. We're choosing a category, application, and then over to the right, we can show it all that well. This is choosing the application. All these are applications that are profiled in our ad system. We're choosing the name. And see, it tells us that, I think that's that, say 68 users are affected. And then we're saying we want to notify the affected users. Almost all the time, we would want to notify them. If it's something that we don't feel like it's going to interrupt them at all, then we want to notify them. We're saying when the date and time that the outage is planned for. This proposed restore, obviously, that is a crystal ball guess. The key client, we typically consult. We have what we call application custodians. Who's the point person who maybe requested that application or is the key user. And that's just to say that we talked with them and they said it was okay. And then we put a message. You can see there we have, like, you can search messages, which that could be useful because, again, this is a planned one. We're not too much of a crisis. But in a time of a crisis, it's sort of hard to come up with good words. We generally are fairly vague about what we say here. We don't try to give them a lot of detail because usually they don't really want to know too much about it. They just want to know. We just say it's going to be unavailable. I'm saying it's to apply an application update. This was even worse demo when you could hear my voice on it. 'Cause I was saying what I was doing, and I said, "Gotta cut the sound." If y'all have ever done Camtasia recordings, that's what takes so long. You have to do it over 10 times because you say, "Oh, I sound so country." Oh, this background information. What that is for the notification message is what you're proposing to send to the clients. The background is for your coworkers, the other managers and all that you're sending it to. It is what they say is the rest of the story. It's telling you more background detail. Because if you don't put that, then Mike Taylor's going to say, what is this all about? Why is there this outage?
So this is going to generate the actual email message that...
Yes, what's going to happen here is, what's going to happen here is when you submit the outage is first, it's going to send an email to, in our case, we have pre-identified who it should send the email to, which are all the other service area MIS managers, plus request services and stuff like that. And it is going to say, a planned outage has been submitted for so-and-so date. Please go to inform to approve. And you'll have a little link. And then the link will take you into a form and they can see all of this. And then it's already set up so that you saw in there where I'm telling them when they need to approve by. And you try to be nice and give people a decent amount of time to approve by. But if they don't approve by then, they will get a reminder, this is waiting your approval. We have rules in place, because obviously some managers are going to be out of town at any given point. Request services can approve on behalf of somebody, or they can just go on without their approval if they feel like they have enough approvals to go on. And then once the managers have approved, request services will click a button to say post the message, and it will post the message on our intranet, and it will email that audience that said was affected.
If we said we wanted to notify.
Yeah, if we said we wanted to notify. The other thing is administrative services, because they click the button, they also have an opportunity to clean up this message whoever submitted it didn't do so well. I will say people have gotten a lot better, because by doing it this way, you see what your coworkers submit, and you know what is, generally speaking, a nicely written message. Do you want to mention the example?
I will, because as you can see here, and especially would be if someone said that this outage was related to a network segment, which
We can talk about that because we don't have representation from anybody.
And so, and if you do that, then you're choosing that, and then you're getting options, and it's showing you what is the equipment and all that kind of thing. And so what will happen is that it's going to show under affected systems something like that. And what we try to be careful of and have our folks be careful of is if that's going to end up, that's going to be in the subject line when there's an email, unless we change it. And we change it here, or we change it at the point before sending the email. Because you want it to be something that will mean something to the people who are receiving the information. And I was telling Donna that even though we have come a long ways, we're doing pretty good. I saw that yesterday, just to give you an idea, we had an outage. And now in this case, I'm not bashing anybody too much, because this was not one that got emailed out to all of Pitt County government. It was kind of internal and that kind of stuff. But the subject line ended up being, for those that did get it internally, system update, Catalyst 3560X 24-port GE1NM switch outage. And so if it's that kind of thing, what you really want is to be able to have something that says, you know, that doing this help identify who's affected downstream, so that's valuable. But what you want to be able to say is that, okay, your SuccessNet application and document management system and so-and-so will be temporarily whatever. You don't want to say a catalyst switch. So, okay, and for another example, which we're not going to show the screens because that's really not the most important part anyway, but an example of an unplanned outage, and let's see, we use Cisco Voice over IP, and we have 3 call managers, one of which is in our remote data center. And so if we had an example where that the call manager publisher remote data center is either down unexpectedly or for whatever reason is not communicating with the rest of the system, is that the phones that normally register that will re-register to another call manager, is what should happen. But what will happen is that people who are accustomed to being able to get to the corporate directory from their phone to be able to look up, you know, here's the number of people, they're not going to see that for a period of time until this is resolved. And we in MIS are not going to be able to access the interface to be able to make changes or add somebody. So there is some impact. And so what we want to do is to do an informational thing so that people don't feel like they have to call and maybe they don't know, is it just me, and all that kind of thing like we were saying before. So we would go into inform, and we would say that this is unplanned, and which means that it's not going to require any approvals because the tree is following it, you know, too late for that. But it still can help identify who needs to be notified and that kind of thing. So, one of the things I was going to mention was just because, like I said, it's kind of, it's meat and potatoes, it's you know, may not be exciting stuff, but it is kind of necessary. And when Donna and I were talking about this and how that sometimes what can be a challenge, maybe especially amongst technical people, is to really be able to assign value and importance to communicating with our customers, with our clients, because sometimes you don't really know everything. You might not really know what's caused this or how long it's going to take. And if you're, you know, the person who is in the hot seat to try to troubleshoot and fix it, you might not want to take time to put in anything or to communicate with administrative services, although our folks are coming along and to appreciate that. But what we were talking about was, if you have been in this area long enough to be able to remember 1999 with a 500-year flood, people remember that. And if you remember watching TV and what really a lifeline the news anchors and the meteorologists were. I mean, because they didn't know everything. They probably didn't even know how bad it was going to get, and they didn't know how long, but they did know some things, and they knew, you know, don't get out on the roads and go here because this is happening, this is what's happening to the community, and so it was logistically a lifeline and psychologically, I would say, you know, as far as like bringing the community together and you feel like that somebody's out there, you know, and that kind of thing. And then even we had to really be able to remember Walker Cronkite, perhaps. He was a news anchor and one time considered the most trusted man in America, something like that. And these are people that they don't have all the answers, and a lot of times what they're conveying is bad news, but there is value in it. And knowing the situation and, okay, this is going to be down, we get my paper forms. Because depending on what your area and what your function is, you may be able to switch gears, do something else, going great, but you might have, the show might have to go on, you know, in whatever manner it did before you had the application or something like that. So there is a lot of value in it.
We wanted to mention, we've spent most of our time talking about system outages and system relationships, but there are a number of ways that one can engage, and these are some that we have run into ourselves. I'm sure you have others. One I already mentioned, that we have a liaison in each department, and that's where normal service requests are filtered through that person, and they approve them. And that helps in ways that you can imagine. And then they can be specially trained, and we meet with them annually to explain things to them. The next one I particularly want to talk about is near to my heart because I'm in the area where we are either developing a new system or going to implement one. And I tell you, something that's been so important, and we had one really shining example, and that is when you have a real true project partnership, almost like co-project leaders. You have a project leader from IT, but then you have a business project leader. And one example we had this past year was in our emergency management area. We were developing a SIMS, a crisis information management system, and Angela Brown, who is in emergency management, I could hardly say enough nice things about it. It's like, you all know what it's like when you have somebody that is personally invested in a project. I mean, like, she was the one who came up with training scenarios. I mean, she called together all the potential users of this system when there's an EOC activation, and she wrote out a scenario of a mock disaster, a hurricane, and wrote out scenarios that each person was to do. And it's hard to go on about how much difference that makes. Because without that, we're in an awkward position sometimes in IT because you don't feel like you have the authority to tell them to use the system that you wrote. But if you have a client representative there, they can rally their team behind that. Pam, I think you want to talk about help desk.
I'll just mention about that because we do have, our help desk is called Request Services, and we have a request management system, but we have guidelines. Sure other people do as well, but it's just if a request is someone calls in and is submitted, and we have an expectation that the request will be assigned to someone within a certain amount of time, and that there would be an acknowledgement back to the client within a certain amount of time, just so that, I mean, maybe nothing's been done yet, but they know it's been assigned and I have your request and all this kind of thing. And then we have an expectation that the person be assigned will put updates in the request as to what's going on, and it helps because then the client has some knowledge because they can see the status of the request through our intranet. But it also helps MIS in the future because then we have a record of, what ended up being the problem and what did you do and that kind of thing. And then we also have an expectation that when a request is closed, that the client is copying on that. So they can see that it happened. It's not anything that they don't know about. And even if we have an expectation that requests be completed by the due date in the request, and we have guidelines for how much time should be allowed for different kinds of requests. We don't necessarily have an expectation that they'll always be finished by that number of days, but we do have an expectation that if someone needs more time, they're going to request a date change. And it just just kind of keeps things managed, and so the clients have a reason to think this hasn't been forgotten, and this is being, taken care of in an orderly fashion, and that kind of thing.
This next item, even though most of our clients are internal county staff, we do get requests from the public on occasion, and what we've done, which I'm sure many of you have done as well, but to engage better with our clients. None of us really like to get a data request and then you have to charge them so much per page or to do a data extract and all. I mean, you don't really love to do that, but you have to because it's the commissioners have agreed on this fee schedule. So what we have is we've been gradually building up our public data portal, and what we look at is, okay, we're starting to get a right many requests of this nature, so let's put that data out there. And so every year we add some more data, and so we'll still get those requests, and we'll say, I could run that report for you and charge you, or you can visit our public data portal and you can access it anytime you want to and download it. It'll be free, and most of the time free. Not all the time, you'd be surprised. Sometimes people still want you to do it for them. But most of the time it does, and so that's something that is a way to engage with our public clients. Do you want to talk about internal clients anymore? I think one thing is extension of what she was saying is those requests, our internal clients can see that they have this thing where they can see all the open requests in their name and they can see the status of it and all. That's why we always encourage our folks not to, they need to put comments on it if they're working on it.
And I think also, might be this, that, and the other. We'd be interested to hear your thoughts if you all have other kinds of client engagement that you like to do. But for accessibility for clients too, would include things like being able to access their desktop remotely kind of thing. And I think I had mentioned in the introduction how that we do mobile device management, and we're all but finished with our BlackBerry Enterprise Server Express, thankfully. And we had made a decision a long time ago that when we did displace that we did not want to be in a position of trying to guess what is going to be the next platform we're going to standardize on. And so we have in an overhaul of our cellular policy for the counties that does take into consideration that some people have devices that they want to use and are willing to use, and that there could be a stipend, and it could just be for voice and data, if there's department head and county manager approval for those things. But also we're using AirWatch, not trying to get off onto that, but it's nevertheless, part of it is trying to be sensitive to the fact that people do have different kinds of devices for different purposes, and we want to be able to support different operating systems and that sort of thing. And also have a browser component to it so that they can access our intranet through that and be able to get to things.
I mentioned service level agreements here. You remember the very first slide, one of the first slides said in order to meet client expectations, you have to know what their expectations are. Sometimes people have a jaded view of service level agreements because they figure like internally, it's not like we're going to sue our internal departments if we can't agree. But one thing that it really does serve is, to me, it's almost like project documentation when you're developing something. It isn't about the document as much as it is about the conversation that goes into the document. To document these things, you had to have had a conversation with the client where you're discussing how backups are going to do and system availability and how critical this system is, because their idea could be very different than your idea. And at least by having gone through the exercise of documenting an SLA, you all have discussed that and hopefully reached a consensus, but at least an understanding. And especially where it comes to roles and expectations, like we are responsible for this and you're responsible for this. And so I do think that is an important aspect of client engagement.
As far as client follow-ups, I think this was mentioned before, but we do an annual, or at least most years, annual client survey, and it's where we have representatives from Request Services that will go and meet with department heads and with the liaisons there weren't. And so we can measure that year to year. And we don't do that, we have not to this point elected to do that by electronically sending the survey out, but it's an actual visit, because there are times when someone will be answering a certain way, but you can just see the expression on the face and there's something else. Is there something else that you want to tell us? And that kind of thing, so that's helpful. And then throughout the year though, my group also does client follow-ups where is kind of randomly choosing some requests that were closed within a certain period of time for each service area. You contacting that client to try to find out what was their degree of satisfaction, was their request acknowledged, and all this kind of thing like that, just to try to find out how things are going, in case there's patterns that need to be addressed.
We talked about this. Because of the mobile environment, people do expect more perhaps than what they used to, and they expect quicker response than what they used to. And this is Pam's favorite photo.
Well, I just like it because, it's, sometimes you're trying to build a space shuttle for people who think that's what they would want, it's going to take $1 million and a million years to do, and they would be just so thrilled if they could get this one report, or, sometimes there's low-hanging fruit and there's things like that. It's just a matter.
Well, it was our goal to end in time that you could get over to the prizes and all that and without having to rush. But does anyone else have a comment that you want to make, maybe how you all engage?
I have a question about your notifications. It looks like a good time week. What happens if emails happen?
I'm glad you mentioned that. We were supposed to say something. Take it away.
Well, one thing is if email is down, then we have the notifications always go into our intranet under system notifications that people can check, and we make sure we routinely remind them that you can always check there for things. But sometimes you may have something where the whole system would be down. And so we did at a certain point realize, because if the system's down, it could even include the phones. And so we have, this is not anything that's an elaborate thing, but it nevertheless, to find out alternate numbers for some people who are liaisons or people in each department. It may be cell phones, it could be their personal phone or some kind of county phone, or just something, so that if there is something that we need, that we anticipated that could happen, and that we have this list and we on some basis check it to make sure that it's current and can be used, because you're exactly right, that can happen.
We picked up some pointers here at the conference and how to engage with our clients as well. This one is when you don't want to be recognized because the system's down and you don't know when it'll be back. Okay, if there are no more questions, or do you have one?
I do have a question, and I'm sorry I was late. I didn't know if maybe you showed it already, but do you have an example of the email that's actually sent out to the users?
We don't have a shot of it, but it would look very much like that screen. Maybe I can go back again.
Would you be willing to share it with me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It is.
Because I have one right here I can forward to you that's about the catalyst switch.
Sure, yeah.
Depends on if you're patient enough to do that, but when it gets down to the notification message, it'll say like as I say, we genericize it some. We just say the so-and-so system will be unavailable today between so-and-so and it will usually either say for planned maintenance. We usually are generic that way. In this case, it was an application update. We'll say an update if we know that, because we don't want to insult. It's a fine line. You don't want to insult the intelligence of the clients, because we know that they know something's going on. We just don't feel the need to go into a whole lot of excruciating detail. And then we always end our messages saying something like, "You can always check system status here," and it's on our intranet. And we have a place on our intranet that always has the open outages, and then when they're closed, and that's the open point we didn't make either, is we guess at when they're going to be closed, but when they're actually finished is up to the service area who's working on it to notify administrative services that the outage will be closed because the system is back up and we've confirmed it, and then they will send out another email saying the system is now available for use.
And also, if we really guessed at how long it was going to take, and that probably more often would be an unplanned outage because we maybe haven't finished troubleshooting, we really don't know. And so if we guessed and that time is approaching and it's not back available, is that we will do an update of some kind, rather than just to leave people hanging.
Well, thank you for coming. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
What? Really?
Neglect county property. What's that?
We already said we